So confession guys, I've never played the original Battletoads back in the day. My first time hearing about the series was AVGN's video on it, and the first time I actually played the game was on Rare Replay. And as a fan of Ninja Turtles and Street Sharks, and a fan of beat 'em ups in general, I really enjoyed the game, even if it was brutally difficult. Come 2019 and the announcement of a new game, and I was pretty hyped, though I felt like I was in the minority, as while I liked the new art style, and still do, not everyone was on board. Art style aside though, I'm here to tell you the game is good. Really good. The story of Battletoads 2020 is really simple. For the past 26 years, the Battletoads have unknowingly been trapped in a simulation, living out their lives as famous heroes. After an alien frees them and they're caught up to speed on the world around them, they try to adapt to normal mundane lives. Rash, unable to do so, he gets Zitz and Pimple on board to recapture their fame and glory again, and off they go. Nothing too crazy, but the plot works well with the cartoon vibe the game gives off, and it reminds me a bit of the recent Rocco movie that came out on Netflix. The game is pretty entertaining. To be honest, I was just expecting a total cringe fest with fart jokes and burp jokes, the kind of stuff you see on Nickelodeon, but it actually had me laugh in some parts. This one scene after the first boss battle really got me.
And so I finally passed into the afterlife. Wait! There's nothing here! Make the most of the time you have!
Yikes.
The jokey, over-the-top personality of the Toads are great, allowing the three of them to play off of each other really well. Now, it's not to the level of other animated comedies, but it's not bad. Kind of like a PG version of Rick and Morty. Won't need a high IQ to enjoy this one, guys. Gameplay-wise, it's your standard beat 'em up. Fighting enemies with a light attack, a move that launches enemies into the air to juggle, and a chargeable heavy attack. Shaking it up, you're able to use your tongue to pull enemies towards you, or spit on them to temporarily stun them, and focus on other enemies. Each Toad plays a little differently, with Zitz, the leader and supposed smartest of the group, moves and hits fast. Pimple, the peaceful big guy, moves slow and hits hard. And finally, the fame-obsessed Rash is a happy medium between the two of them. The enemies come in different variants. Your standard weaklings you can button mash to death, enemies who can block attacks requiring a charge attack to punch through, tanks you have to dodge past in order to make vulnerable, and long-range enemies who will fire projectiles. Because of the mix of different enemies, combat can get chaotic fast, especially if you're playing with friends. I'll get to that later though. Playing by yourself, you can swap between the Toads on the fly, or when one dies, and each Toad gets a cooldown timer before you can bring them back into the fight. This keeps it balanced for single players so you don't feel overwhelmed without a friend. In between some levels, you'll have some mini-games to break up the beat-em-up action. Aren't anything too crazy, but fun little distractions. Beside those levels, you'll also have bike segments, similar to the Turbo Tunnel, though played from an over-the-shoulder perspective this time as opposed to a side-scrolling one. There's also some platforming levels and shmup levels that get so tough they border on bullet hell. They can be so difficult and time-consuming, it'll most likely be the first time you get the option to turn on invincibility mode. Similar to some Nintendo games, when you die enough in a given level, you'll have the option to turn on an invincibility mode. It'll make you immune to damage, letting you beat any level you can't get past. The trade-off, however, is you won't receive a score for that level, so you'll have to go back and play it the normal way if you're a completionist. I was playing it on Toad level, or normal, essentially, and while some parts were definitely tough, I never needed the option to use invincibility, as the game was generous with its checkpoint system in most levels. Getting back to the art style, I can't get over how good it looks. I know it's not for everyone, and some probably would have preferred highly detailed sprites instead, but I think it works well. The characters are designed really well, each Toad being distinct from each other and their body types correlating with their playstyles. That said, like a lot of others, I'm not a big fan of the Dark Queen's redesign though. Barely resembling her old design, and instead looking a lot like Dr. Draken from Kim Possible. I get they probably had to tone it down to make it more kid-friendly, but you'd think she'd look more like a queen at least. The level designs stand out as well. You start off in a futuristic cyberpunk world, followed by a decrepit amusement park, then some sewers, and even a forest area that transitions into a lumber mill. They're a bit straightforward though, so there aren't any branching paths or secret exits. There are hidden collectibles to find though, so levels do get some replay value. And finally, the music in the game is fantastic. A solid rock and metal soundtrack with some good remixes of old tunes. Despite the heap of praise I've given the game, it's not without its problems. The first and probably biggest is the lack of online co-op. Nowadays I'm used to it being the opposite, only online co-op and no couch co-op. Not the case here. It's baffling really, Even if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, I would have thought Delilah Studios would have focused on a functional online mode. It's possible it'll be added in the future, but for now, if you want to play with friends, it'll have to be in person. The next problem I have is that the third act of the game really drags. I won't spoil the story, what little story there is, but you spend more time platforming and in shmup sections than you do actually battling enemies. Considering the difficulty of the shmup levels at times and the game's overall short length, it's really disappointing. Another is an overall lack of boss battles. A good chunk of the levels just end with a minigame or a cutscene, and when you do get a boss battle, they can be a bit brain dead in terms of difficulty. I would have preferred a few more bosses over some of the drawn out platforming sections. And finally, despite being part of the team for most of the game, you never actually play as the Dark Queen, which is kinda disappointing. Instead, certain levels have you controlling her weird minion thing. Seems like such a missed opportunity. So, is Battletoads 2020 worth your time? Absolutely. While I think its price tag on Steam could be a bit cheaper due to its short length and lack of online multiplayer, it's absolutely worth it if you have Xbox Game Pass. I believe it's a great reboot/revival of the series, and while the art style will probably still be a big turnoff to some, it's still the same difficult beat-em-up you played back in the day, especially if you played on Battletoad mode. Add in a fun, if sometimes dumb story, with some wacky characters that can be a bit much sometimes, and you've got a solid game. And that's the video. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I had originally planned a different video after Legends, but I'm still working on recording footage for that one, so it may be a bit. As you guys can tell from the audio, I've also upgraded my microphone, so I won't be sounding so tinny and grainy going forward. If you enjoyed the video, or didn't enjoy it, feel free to give it a like or dislike below. Post in the comments and let me know what your thoughts are on the new Battletoads. And if you like my video and want to see more, I would love it if you subscribed. This is Fuzzy Slippers, and I'll see you later.